This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 341, entitled Projects that only arcing MGTOW monks can do. Description. This flyer claims that archers, that is after retirement careerers, who are MGTOW monks, that is men going their own way, who are womanless in their daily lives, can do more for humanity than twaytweffing, that is 2A2F equals 2 apartments, 2 FIPs, that is financially independent persons, archers. Because the former have much larger amounts of mental energy to devote to their arcing, who do not fritter it away on chasing their next girlfriend to get some sex, so are able to focus their minds better on what they have chosen to devote their arcing lives to. Thus humanity will benefit far more from the MGTOW monk archers than from the twaytwef archers. The flyer itself. Projects that only arcing MGTOW monks can do, by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. In order to make this flyer self-contained, I need to give some definitions so that the title can be understood. An archer, that's A-R-C-E-R, is an after-retirement careerer. That is, usually someone who has retired in his 60s or 70s, who has good genes and puts in the work to remain highly health conscious, so that he expects to reach 100. That is another 3 decades of life. That is the third of life. A MGTOW monk is a MGTOW, that is a man who belongs to the men going their own way movement, an important branch of the men's lib movement, who lives the lifestyle of a monk, that is, he does not date, has no sex with women, who has no contact with women. His life is womanless. I'm a MGTOW monk archer, one of millions in the Western world who, as archers, feel that they do not want to waste their final decades with useless pastimes, so undertake a new, substantial career doing what they love, since they are no longer wage slaves to an employer, so are free to undertake a new career as their jobby, their job/hobby. And since they are doing what they love doing, they will give that new career a ton of commitment and mental energy. Since millions of us are now doing this new demographic will have a profound impact on society, as millions of archers who have already a lot of experience, both professional and in life, will bring a flood of new ideas and influence to society. To illustrate the kind of thing that archers do, I'll give myself as a concrete example. After I've finished annotating a handful of books that I will teach from, I will start to film/video some 120 plus YouTube lecture courses in pure math, physics and computer theory at Masters and PhD levels, so that Masters and PhD level students can teach themselves these subjects for free. I also make e-libraries by putting up Google supplied links to full content texts in these subjects. The aim is to revolutionize graduate level education in these subjects by making them free, so that students I call alphas, that is students with top percentile IQs, can be given access to the materials they need to teach themselves. Since they are alphas, they are smart enough to understand the lectures that I film and give them, and they can read the textbooks whose links I put in my e-libraries at the click of a mouse, or the touch of a finger on their smartphones that nearly the whole planet has now. This arcing project of mine is a major commitment of my time and energy. That is a whopping 3 decades worth, which is not something a wager would even consider undertaking. I divide the usual lifespan into 3 main phases. 1. Prepping. 2. Waging. 3. Arcing. Prepping is one's childhood, youth, and young adulthood, in which one gets an education to give one the skills and knowledge to be more able to wage effectively, that is, earn money, a wage, usually as an employee, paid to do some work by an employer, a company, a governmental institution, etc. Arcing is what one does after waging in the third of life, which is also similar to waging, except that you are not paid for your work, since you are retired by definition, and you get to choose what you do based on what you love to do. Your arcing is your jobby. I make the claim that life is all about arcing, the main focus of one's life. Since the arcing period is at least about a third of life, if one is health conscious and lives a healthy, long life, making the effort to do the right things to avoid shortening it, e.g. by eating lots of green vegetables and fruit, walking one's 10,000 steps a day, doing stretching exercises daily, routinely, taking multivitamins, watching one's weight so as not to become fat or far worse, obese, as are now 40% of the adult population, who will shorten their life expectancy by a decade or more, etc., then one can say that the first 2 major phases of one's life are merely preparations for the 3rd phase, the arcing phase, the most rewarding and enriching phase of one's life that future arcers really look forward to. The major attraction of the arcing phase is that one arcs doing what one loves, rather than what some employer dictates to you what you must do, since you are working within a contract. The employer pays you to do something that the employer wants and needs you to do. If you find the work boring and alienating, that is of no concern to the employer, since he is paying you to do that work. If you work poorly and take days off, then the employer will feel he is not getting his end of the bargain met by you, and will be motivated to replace you with someone who does a better job for the money the employer pays. Thus, waging, the 2nd phase of one's life, often has an aspect of wage slavery about it, because most people do not have jobbies in their waging phase. They feel more enslaved, but also feel they have no choice, since they have to eat and pay the rent, so they know that they have to work. Once one sees life in 3 phases, prepping, waging, and arcing, then the obvious question arises as to how many years can one arc doing what one loves. The point of this flyer is to state that if you are a MGTOW monk, then you can be an arcer for many more years than can a manslave to some bloody parasitic fluffy who lives off her manslave husband's money and labour. A MGTOW monk can arc for many more years than a manslave, for the obvious reason that he is spending his money only on himself, compared to a manslave who pays for a fluffy parasitic wife and her kids. So MGTOW monks can save up faster and retire earlier in life, years, even decades earlier. For example, in his 40s, and spend the rest of his life arcing, doing what he loves, and not what some employing slave master dictates to him what he does. Now that the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites have taken over the divorce courts and made them so toxic for men that in many Western countries now 2/3 of young men wipe their hands of marriage and paternity, choosing to live the MGTOW lifestyle. That is, they are men going their own way, that is, marriageless and childless, preferring to spend their money on themselves rather than be parasited on by some hated, manslaving, immoral, parasitic fluffy who expects to be able to live off the money of a man, so she can stay at home in a house that he pays for, raising her kids. The fluffy feminists, in all their short-sighted hypocrisy, are the root cause of the rise and rise of alternative lifestyles for men, as millions of young men reject marriage and paternity, who then look upon arking as a very real and viable alternative lifestyle. If you're a MGTOW monk, then you don't waste any mental energy thinking about how to get your next girlfriend so that you can penis her. Many MGTOWs do date because they want the sex, but refuse to marry and have kids, so still have a lot more money for themselves rather than pay for a fluffy parasite and her kids, which keeps a manslave for many more years of his life. In this sense, that is, the large numbers of years that are fluffy parasites of a manslave, the oppression of women by women of men is far worse than the oppression of women by men. However, since most feminists know nothing of masculism, they don't see things this way. To monoconscious feminists, that is, have only had their feminist consciousness raised, that is, are not bi-conscious, that is, they have not had both their feminist and their masculist consciousnesses raised, the masculists claim that women oppress men far more than vice versa sounds ludicrous, but it's true, as can be readily seen once one has had one's masculist consciousness raised, and one calculates how many years, that is, how many decades, a fluffy parasite manslaves a man, her husband. But a full MGTOW monk who not only rejects marriage and paternity, but does not even date, he can do more great things with his arcing phase of life than a MGTOW who twaytweffs, that is, lives the twaytwef, that is, equals 2A2F equals 2 apartments, 2 FIPs lifestyle with a woman, both of whom are FIPs, financially independent persons, and both have their own apartment, so that when the relationship fails, as most do, then the two of them simply return to their respective apartments, cost-free for the man, no alimony because the ex-girlfriend is a FIP, no divorce because no marriage, no child support because no kids, etc. Twaytweffing forces the woman to be nice to the man, that is, no nagging, no withholding sex, no manipulation or trying to mould him the way she wants, otherwise he walks away. But twaytweffing still takes a huge amount of mental energy because one is interacting with another human being. There is twaytweffing and twaytweffing. For example, a couple might see each other for 3 evenings a week, mainly for sex and a bit of companionship. Alternatively, if the man sees his twaytwef partner mostly as a sexual partner, then he could see her only once a week, get the sex, and then spend the rest of the week arcing, which is hugely less costly in terms of time and mental energy. At least that way he gets the best of both worlds, the sex and a freeing up of his mind to concentrate on his arcing jobby. Since a lot of the years spent arcing are in the final decades of one's life, there is the lower testosterone factor. That is, when men get into their 70s, their testosterone levels really drop, so that they become much less cunt hungry compared to younger men, so can more easily just give up on women altogether, seeing them as femalians. That is pretty much my situation now. I live the lifestyle of a MGTOW monk in practice. I don't date. I tried for 6 months after arriving in Melbourne, Australia, after having lived half a century in 6 other countries, the previous 12 years being in China. Since I'm a maths/physics/computing prof, I'm too bright for the large majority of women. And the few PhD women on my e-dating site are mostly monoconscious feminazi assholes who hypocritically have the attitude, quote, "How dare you criticize women?" which strikes me as a masculist as utterly hypocritical and contemptible, so I don't have anything to do with such women, and vice versa. That situation is not going to change until these monoconscious feminazi bitches become bi-conscious by having their masculist consciousness raised. But that's not going to happen until the broadcast media really takes up the masculist message and spreads it to the masses, including these monoconscious feminazi hypocrites who feel it's okay for women, for feminists, to lash out at how men oppress women. But it's not okay for men, for masculists, to lash out at how women oppress men. And far worse, because female oppression of men is far deeper and lasts decades. Once men go full MGTOW monk, their minds are freed up to concentrate on what they focus their arcing lives on. In my case, it's being a globicator, that is, a global educator, a 30-year massive project that is not the sort of thing that a younger man would even think of doing. But since I'm in my early 70s, I think of the next 3 decades of my life as merely a third of my life. I know who I am and what I like doing, what my strengths and weaknesses are, because I've already lived 70 plus years and have had plenty of time to learn who I am. Now imagine millions of men living the arcing lifestyle, spending huge amounts of time and energy doing what they love doing and taking their new career very seriously. The social impact of these millions of men, this new demographic, these arcers, will be enormous. Such men will have the luxury to start new careers in topics that are new to them. I suspect that people become less creative and more intellectually stagnant with age, not because they have become older, but because they feel less challenged and are bored with what they have been doing for too many years. I think that when men start arcing, doing what they love, and are in good health by bothering to make the effort to remain healthy, then they will have a freshness of mind that a young person who is also tackling a new topic. That is what matters is how new is the topic to the person, with a young or an older archer. With millions of archers entering many fields of endeavour, they will impact strongly on those fields, being fresh minds with lots of experience from other fields, thus enriching these fields. It is thus to be expected that millions of archers will increase the level of creativity in many fields, as these millions of archers bring their mature wisdom and multified perspective to their new fields that young people cannot compete with. Society will become increasingly conscious of these new archers, this new demographic of very healthy, health-conscious retirees who take up new careers with a commitment that only people who truly love the field can muster. Their voice will be heard. Those archers who are MGTOW monks will be able to devote more of their mental energy to their arcing than men who twaytwef, so will be more committed and achieve a lot more. The MGTOW monk archers will therefore be able to do what twaytwef archers cannot, because the latter have less mental energy. They are not as committed as the MGTOW monk archers. That is just common sense. Having a strong focus in one's life as an archer is probably an important factor in one's life. If no such focus is there, then many men will just drift and waste their remaining years. Maybe many men are simply incapable of self-focusing like that and need some employer to tell them what to do with their lives. That may be true. But for those men, those MGTOW monk archers who are capable of self-focusing, they will very probably do great things in the coming decades, since they have both the time and the mental energy to achieve those great things. I expect more to come from these MGTOW monk archers than from the twaytwef archers, since the latter have their mental energies frittered away by femalians, who are such attention and male mental energy sponges/parasites, who care more about their own emotional needs than the value to humanity of the achievements of the MGTOW monk archers. For example, imagine if Gustav Mahler had been healthier and did not have a parasitic wife and 2 kids to pay for, to work for. He could have written more beautiful symphonies, felt more deeply about his music and the ideas behind his symphonies than he actually did. A great loss of creativity and hence benefits to humanity coming from male genii is caused by femalians who parasite off the mental energy of these male genii. Such women are truly culture criminals in that sense, because they deprive the world of so many products of male cultural and intellectual genius. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. In brackets. Contains links to 300 plus YouTube, Minds, BitChute, Masculist essays / videos. And to the book, Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man-Slaves to Women. An e-textbook of 300 plus Masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Ciao.